There is something you're trying to control right now. Maybe it is another person, what they think about you, whether they love you, whether they will stay. Maybe it is something that already happened, a conversation you keep replaying, something you said, something they said, a moment you have examined so many times that part of you still believes one more thought might somehow change it. Or perhaps it is the future, something that hasn't happened yet. And still somehow you have already lived through it 100 times in your head. What if they leave? What if I fail? What if I make a wrong decision? What if everything changes? So you think, you prepare, you analyze, you try to predict, because somewhere inside you is the hope that if you think about something long enough, you might finally gain control over it. But there is a strange problem with trying to control everything. Eventually, the thing you're trying to control begins controlling you. Nearly 2,000 years ago, one of the most powerful men in the world struggled with exactly this. Marcus Aurelius was Emperor of Rome. Armies moved under his command. Governors answered to him. His decisions affected millions of people. And yet, in private, he kept reminding himself how little of life actually obeyed him. He could command soldiers. He could not command another person's mind. He could make plans. He could not command tomorrow. He could behave honorably. He could not force others to do the same. He could love someone. He could not force them to stay. He could do everything correctly and still lose. That may be one of the hardest things about being human to accept, because many of us carry around an invisible agreement with life. If I do everything right, things will turn out right. Be good, work hard, choose carefully, love people well, prepare, don't make mistakes, and perhaps life will reward you with certainty. But life never signed that agreement. Sometimes careful plans fail. Sometimes people leave. Sometimes good people are treated badly. Sometimes you make the best decision you can and still get the outcome you did not want. And that is when the mind begins negotiating with reality. Why did this happen? What if I had noticed sooner? What if I had said something differently? What happens next? The mind tells us this thinking is useful. It feels like preparation. It feels like problem solving. Sometimes it even feels like a responsibility. But there is a difference between thinking that produces an action and thinking that simply produces more thinking. That second kind of thinking has a name: rumination. You circle the same problem without moving toward a solution. And worry becomes deceptive because it makes you feel as though you are still doing something. But sometimes there is nothing left to do. the message has already been sent, that conversation has already happened, the decision belongs to somebody else. The past has already become the past. And still, we keep working on it. We stare at the phone, we interpret silence, we imagine conversations that have not happened. The body is sitting quietly in a room, but the mind is living through 20 possible futures. Marcus knew something about that exhaustion. He became emperor in the year 161. His reign brought war, disease, political instability, and profound personal loss. The Antonine plague spread through the Roman world. Several of his children died young, and during years of military campaigning, Marcus kept writing. Not for a publication, not for an audience, but for himself. Imagine him at night near Rome's northern frontier. Reports have arrived. Troops, movements, illness, deaths, problems back in Rome. And eventually, the camp becomes quiet. Marcus is alone. And instead of asking, "How can I make the universe behave?" he keeps returning to a different question. How should I behave within the universe as it is? The distinction is the heart of this, because there are two very different questions you can ask when life becomes uncertain. How can I make sure nothing bad happens? Or who will I be if something does? The first requires control over the world. The second requires character. Stoicism does not mean that you stop caring. It does not mean becoming passive. It means knowing where your power ends. If something useful can be done, do it. Make the call, have the conversation, set the boundary, apologize, ask for help, act. But eventually, you reach the edge, the place where there is no additional useful action. And that is where many of us replace action with worry. Preparation eventually says, "Here is what I will do." And worry says, "But what if?" And there is no final answer, because what you are really searching for is not a plan. You are searching for certainty. And life rarely gives us that. So perhaps the better question is not, how do I control what happens next? Perhaps it is, what actually belongs to me now? And sometimes the thing you are trying hardest to control is another person. This is where control becomes especially difficult, because when someone matters to us, their choices affect us. Their attention can make us feel safe. Their silence can make us anxious. Their affection can make an ordinary day feel extraordinary, and their withdrawal can make the same world suddenly feel cold and unfamiliar. So we begin watching. Did their tone change? Why haven't they called? Why are they quieter today? Are they pulling away? Did I do something? Sometimes these questions are reasonable. Relationships require attention, but there is a point where attention becomes monitoring. Instead of experiencing the relationship, you begin measuring it. And underneath all that measuring is often one frightened question: am I safe here? So you seek reassurance. Everything is fine. They love you. They're not leaving. And for a little while you feel better until something changes again. A delayed response, a distracted evening, a strange expression, and suddenly the uncertainty returns. The problem is that no amount of reassurance can guarantee the future. No human being can truthfully promise, I will never change. I will never disappoint you. I will always feel exactly as I feel today. Nothing rare will happen to us. Life does not allow those guarantees. And yet, sometimes we ask relationships to provide exactly that: permanent protection from uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to an uncomfortable truth about other people. They're going to behave according to their own minds, not yours. In meditations, he reminds himself that he will encounter difficult people, people who are selfish, ungrateful, dishonest, arrogant, unreasonable. He does not expect wisdom to make difficult people disappear. Instead, he keeps bringing himself back to a different question: how do I prevent someone else's behavior from determining mine and who I become? Someone can be rude. Do you have to become cruel? Someone can misunderstand you. Do you have to spend the next 3 days proving yourself? Someone can reject you. Do you have to reject yourself? Someone can dislike you. Do you have to join them? Think about how much energy we spend trying to live inside other people's minds. What do they think of me? Why did they say that? Do they understand me? Do they value me? And sometimes, without realizing it, we begin performing for those minds. We accommodate, we explain, we become more agreeable. We shrink certain parts of ourselves. We try to become the person who will finally receive the response that we want. But reputation and character are not the same thing. Reputation exists in other people's minds, and character exists in your actions. You have far more influence over one than the other. And this becomes especially painful when someone leaves, because loss awakens the fantasy of control. What if I had noticed sooner? What if I had been more patient? What if I had called? What if I hadn't called? What if I had changed? Reflection can be useful. We can learn from what happens to us. We can recognize our mistakes. We can apologize. We can become better. But eventually reflection becomes an attempt to rewrite history. And history cannot be rewritten. Regret often asks something impossible of you. Go back and be the person you are today, whose knowledge you only gained because of what happened then. That is impossible. You cannot. You can learn from yesterday, but you can only act today. And perhaps the most painful form of control is trying to make someone stay. When we are frightened of losing someone, sometimes we begin abandoning ourselves in order to keep them. We stop setting boundaries. We tolerate things we shouldn't. We think, if I say no, they might leave. If I tell them what I really need, they might leave. If I stop chasing them, they might leave. And perhaps they will. That is the frightening part. A boundary does not guarantee that someone stays. Sometimes a boundary reveals that the relationship only worked when you had no boundaries. Your responsibility is not to force another person to remain. Your responsibility is to decide what kind of relationship you are willing to participate in. One requires controlling another human being. The other requires governing yourself. And only one of those is actually available to you. You can love someone deeply without possessing them. You can try to repair something without controlling whether it survives. You can tell someone the truth without controlling whether they believe you or not. You can ask to be understood without forcing understanding. You can love someone and recognize that they are free. And perhaps there is someone in your life right now who you are wanting to change. Maybe you want them to choose you, or to apologize, to understand what they did, or to finally recognize your value. Ask yourself something difficult. What if they never do? Does your life remain suspended until they change? Or are you allowed to continue? Sometimes letting someone go does not mean removing them from your life. Sometimes it means letting go of the imaginary version of them you have been waiting for. The person they might become. The apology they might give. The realization they might someday have. You can respond to the person who actually exists, not the person you could create if only you found the perfect words. And when you stop trying to control another person's mind, something slowly returns to you. Your attention, your energy, your time, your life. But another person may not be the hardest person to stop controlling. Sometimes the hardest person is yourself. Unlike everyone else we've talked about, you cannot walk away from you. You wake up with them, you go to sleep with them. You know every mistake they've made, every embarrassing moment, every promise they did not keep, every version of themselves they thought they could or would become but didn't. Sometimes the most exhausting attempt to control is trying to control yourself so completely that you leave no room for being human. You should be farther ahead by now. You should be more successful, more disciplined, more confident. You shouldn't still care about that person. You shouldn't still be angry about that thing. You shouldn't still be grieving something. You should know what you're doing. And perhaps the cruelest one, you should have known better. Listen to the language. Should, should, should. It is the language of an imaginary life, a version of reality in which you always make the correct decision with perfect information. You recognize the wrong person immediately. You never waste time. You never choose the wrong path. You never stay too long. You never leave too soon. You never fail. You never become frightened. You never need to begin again. That person does not exist. And yet we compare ourselves to them constantly. The complicated human being we actually are against an imaginary person who has never made a mistake. And somehow, the imaginary person always wins. Marcus Aurelius knew this struggle too. Meditations is filled with reminders to himself. Do your work, get out of bed, stop wasting time, stop chasing praise. Pay attention to what matters. Remember that life is short. There is even a passage in which Marcus essentially argues with himself about getting out of bed. He would rather stay warm, and he has to remind himself that he has work to do. Apparently, even Roman emperors had mornings when they didn't want to get up. And I think there is something comforting about that, because we often imagine disciplined people as people who no longer experience resistance. They wake up motivated. They never procrastinate. They always know what to do. But discipline is not the absence of resistance. Often it is simply acting while resistance is present. Marcus did not need to become someone who never felt reluctance. He needed to become someone who did not have to obey every feeling. And that distinction matters, because there are things inside us that we can influence, but cannot simply command. And emotion is one of them. Try to make yourself genuinely happy on command. Now make yourself immediately stop missing someone. Stop grieving. Stop feeling anxious. Stop being embarrassed about something you did years ago. It does not really work that way. And yet we punish ourselves because our emotions refuse to obey. Why am I still sad? Why am I still thinking about this? Why can't I get over it? Why am I anxious? And suddenly we have created two problems. First, the feeling itself, and then the judgment that we should not be feeling it. You're anxious. Then you become anxious about being anxious. You're sad. Then you criticize yourself for still being sad. You remember someone. Then you become angry with yourself for remembering them. There is another possibility. You can say, I am anxious right now, without saying something terrible is going to happen. Or you can say, I miss them, without saying, I need to go back. You can say, I am angry, without saying, I need to act while I'm angry. Feelings are real, but feelings are not always instructions. A thought can appear without becoming a command. A memory can return without becoming an evening. A mistake can exist without becoming your identity. And a bad day does not have to become evidence of a bad life. You cannot always control what enters your mind, but you can decide what deserves your attention once it arrives. And the same is true of mistakes. If you did something wrong, correct it if you can. Apologize if you should. Learn what there is to learn. Then continue. Punishing yourself for 10 years does not transform punishment into wisdom. But many of us believe that being hard on ourselves keeps us responsible. Sometimes self-criticism is another attempt to control the future. If I punish myself enough for this mistake, maybe I'll never make another one. If I prepare perfectly, maybe I'll never fail. If I never allow myself to feel satisfied, maybe I'll never become complacent. And slowly, achievement becomes a moving target. You accomplish something. For a moment you feel good, but just for a moment. And then the mind moves the line. Yes, but what about the next thing? Someone else is doing better. You should have done it sooner. It could have been bigger, better, more impressive. And there is no finish line, because what you are really trying to achieve is not success. It is the feeling that you are finally safe from inadequacy, and no accomplishment can permanently guarantee that. There will always be another comparison, another possibility, another life you could theoretically have lived. At some point, you have to decide whether your life is something you are living, or a courtroom in which you are permanently on trial. Marcus thought often about the shortness of life, and mortality clarified things for him. Everyone praising you will eventually disappear. Everyone criticizing you will as well disappear. The mistake you cannot stop thinking about will eventually be forgotten. So perhaps the shortness of life asks a surprisingly gentle question. How much of your limited time does this really deserve? That awkward thing you said, that person who does not approve of you, that opportunity you missed, the fact that your life does not look exactly like the picture you once imagined. How many evenings should these things receive? You are allowed to improve. You are allowed to want more, but you are also allowed to exist before the improvement is complete. You do not have to finish yourself before you are permitted to live. Perhaps you have been telling yourself, I will relax when, or I will enjoy my life when, I will finally be proud of myself when I succeed, when I make enough money, when I find someone, when life becomes calmer, when I finally fix myself, then I'll live. But the future has a strange habit. Whenever it arrives, it becomes today. And if you spend every today waiting for another version of your life to begin, eventually you may discover that the waiting was your life. So perhaps you do not need to become somebody else tonight. Perhaps you can be unfinished and still be worthy of rest and happiness. There will be things to improve tomorrow, work to do, mistakes to correct, decisions to make. But tonight, you can put all the tools down, because letting go of control does not mean giving up. And understanding the difference between those two things may be the most important part of all. Letting go is not the same thing as giving up. It does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean you stop trying. It does not mean you stop caring about what happens. Marcus Aurelius certainly didn't. He governed an empire through war, disease, political conflict, and personal loss. He made decisions. He solved problems. He acted. What he tried to separate was something much more subtle: effort from outcome. Your effort belongs to you. The outcome never belongs entirely to you. You can't prepare carefully for something. You can work hard. You can tell the truth. You can show up. You can do everything in your power and everything available to you. And then reality enters the equation. And other people make choices. Circumstances change. Something unexpected happens. And sometimes you can do everything right and still lose. You can love someone well and the relationship can still fail and end. You can work hard and the opportunity can still disappear. You can make the best decision possible with the information that you have, and later discover that things did not turn out as you hoped. A bad outcome does not always mean you made a bad decision. Life contains chance. Other people, circumstances nobody could have predicted. You make your choice, and then reality gets a vote. Perhaps maturity is not becoming so good at planning that life can no longer surprise you. Perhaps maturity is becoming less terrified of being surprised and being able to say, "This is not what I wanted," and then ask, "What now?" That question is powerful, because sometimes we lose years trying to live from a place that no longer exists. The relationship ended, but mentally we are still inside it. The opportunity has disappeared, but we are still planning around it. Someone changed, but we continue speaking to the person they used to be. Life moved, but our mind stayed behind. Acceptance means locating yourself accurately. I'm here now. Maybe you did not choose here. Maybe here is painful. Maybe here feels unfair. But here's where the next decision has to be made. You cannot navigate from an imaginary location. And this is why acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance clears the map. This happened. This is true. This is what I have. This is what I don't have. This is what I can do. Now what? Sometimes the answer is something very small. One phone call, one conversation, one boundary, 1 hour of work, one night of sleep, one morning when you get up and begin again. You do not need to control the entire road ahead of you. You only need the next step. And you do not need to know where every step will eventually lead you. The future has always been entered without guarantees. Every person who has ever loved someone started something, left something, built something, or begun again, eventually stepped into a future they could not control. We simply become very good at pretending otherwise. And once you stop demanding certainty before you move, the future becomes strangely lighter because you no longer have to solve tomorrow tonight. Tomorrow will bring information you do not have yet, circumstances that do not exist yet, choices that do not need to be made yet. Tonight's responsibility is much smaller. So return for a moment to the thing you were carrying when we began. The unanswered question, the person, the mistake, the decision, the future you have been trying to predict, and ask yourself, what part of this actually belongs to me? Perhaps there is something you need to do. Then do it when the time comes. But perhaps you have already done your part. Perhaps the message has been sent. That conversation has happened. Perhaps the decision belongs to somebody else now. Perhaps the answer simply hasn't arrived yet. And if that is true, then your work for tonight is finished. You do not need to think about it one more time to prove that you care. You do not need to stay awake to prevent tomorrow from surprising you. You do not need to rehearse every possible ending. You do not need to supervise another person's thoughts. You do not need to return to the past and rearrange it. The past is where it is. The other people are where they are. Tomorrow is where it is. And you are here. This is the only part of time that has actually arrived. Perhaps your only responsibility now is to rest, not to solve, not to prepare, not to predict, just to rest. The world does not need you to supervise it while you sleep. Tomorrow can arrive without your help. The unanswered question can remain unanswered for a few more hours. And if the problem truly requires you, it will still be there in the morning. You are allowed to stop. That does not mean you have given up. It does not mean you stop caring. It simply means you have reached the edge of what can be done tonight. So let the world turn. Let other people choose. Let tomorrow remain unknown. Let the past remain closed and let yourself remain unfinished. There will be another morning, another decision, another opportunity to act, another chance to begin. You do not need to live all those moments tonight. You only need this one. So loosen your grip just for tonight. What belongs to you, you can pick up again tomorrow. And what never belonged to you, perhaps you can finally leave where it is. Good night, and welcome back whenever you need a quiet place to put the world down for a while.